Byron Leftwich did exactly what the NFL claims it rewards. He climbed the coaching ladder the right way, earned the trust of players, and called plays for one of the most productive offenses in football. In 2020, that offense didn't just score points, it won a Super Bowl. And yet, a few seasons later, Byron Leftwich was gone. No head coaching job, no offensive coordinator role, no quick return to the league's endless coaching carousel. That silence is the story. Because this isn't about one bad season or one failed interview, it's about how credit is distributed in the NFL and how quickly it can be taken away. When the Buccaneers won, the praise went elsewhere. When things declined, the blame found Leftwich immediately. And once that narrative set in, the phone stopped ringing. In a league where coaches are recycled year after year, where second and third chances are routine, a Super Bowl winning offensive coordinator falling completely off the radar is not normal, it's intentional. This is Old School Sundays, where we break down the stories the league would rather move past and expose the patterns they hope you don't notice. When the Buccaneers' offense exploded, Byron Leftwich was technically in charge, but never treated like the architect. From the moment he took over play calling duties in Tampa Bay, there was a quiet qualifier attached to everything he did. It was always Bruce Arians' offense, always Tom Brady running the show. Leftwich wasn't introduced as a builder, he was framed as a caretaker, someone keeping the engine running while others got credit for designing it. That framing mattered, because from 2019 through 2021, the results were elite by any standard. Tampa Bay ranked near the top of the league in passing yards every season. The offense averaged nearly 30 points per game, two different quarterbacks crossed the 5,000-yard mark, and when the playoffs arrived, the offense didn't shrink, it sharpened. Game plans were precise, adjustments were clean. The Super Bowl was a tactical dismantling, not a fluke. Bruce Arians said publicly that he handed the offense to Leftwich. He admitted he wasn't involved in game planning or play calling. In most cases, that omission would elevate a coordinator's profile. In this case, it barely moved the needle. The league heard it but didn't absorb it. When Tampa Bay won, the credit floated upward. When they lost, it dropped straight down. That imbalance created a dangerous setup. Leftwich was benefiting from success without owning it. He was carrying responsibility without protection, and once the offense finally dipped in 2022, with an aging roster and a quarterback at the end of his career, the narrative snapped into place instantly. No grace period, no context, no buffer. In the NFL, perception becomes résumé faster than results. And once Leftwich was recast as expendable instead of essential, the door didn't just start to close. It slammed, quietly. Because the next step for a Super Bowl winning offensive coordinator should have been obvious. And what didn't happen next is the most revealing part of this story. In the NFL, context is supposed to matter. Roster age, quarterbacks decline, windows close. But context is only applied when the league wants it to be. For Byron Leftwich, it vanished the moment Tampa Bay's offense took a step back in 2022. That season became the pivot point. The Buccaneers were older, injuries stacked up, Tom Brady was in his final year, juggling retirement, return, and a roster that no longer resembled the championship version. The offense shifted from explosive to conservative, not because Leftwich forgot how to call plays, but because survival replaced aggression. Yet none of that followed him into the evaluation. The numbers told a partial story, and the narrative filled in the rest. Tampa Bay dropped to the bottom half of the league in scoring. Red zone struggles became headlines, and suddenly, the same coordinator who had overseen elite production for 3 straight seasons was labeled rigid, outdated, and unimaginative. This is where the double standard surfaced. Other coordinators have down years and are granted patience. They're allowed to reset, retool, and try again. Leftwich wasn't. The offense didn't just decline, his credibility did with it. The Super Bowl ring stopped mattering. The years of top-tier production were treated as a mirage. By January of 2023, Leftwich was fired, and in the NFL, firing is rarely final. Coaches resurface quickly, often within weeks. They land assistant roles, consulting titles, or another coordinator position to get right. That's the normal cycle. Except it didn't apply here. Leftwich didn't rebound into another job. He didn't land softly. He didn't re-enter the league at all. One season became a verdict, not a data point. And once that verdict was accepted, the league moved on as if his resume had expired. What followed wasn't just a firing, it was a disappearance. And that's where this story stops being about performance and starts becoming about access. After the Super Bowl run and before the 2022 collapse rewrote the narrative, Byron Leftwich wasn't on the outside looking in. He was firmly in the mix. Teams called, interviews were scheduled, and for a brief moment, it looked like the league was ready to reward what he had built. The Jacksonville Jaguars were at the center of it. Leftwich was more than just a candidate, he was considered a frontrunner. A former first-round pick returning to the franchise that drafted him, a Super Bowl winning offensive coordinator stepping into a young rebuild. On paper, it made too much sense to ignore. Then it vanished. Jacksonville hired Doug Peterson, and almost immediately, stories started circulating about Leftwich, rumors that he was difficult, that he wanted control, that he had issues with the front office. Reports suggested he turned the job down or demanded changes behind the scene. It painted a picture of a coach who overplayed his hand. Leftwich flatly denies all of it. He says those conversations never happened. He says he never discussed front office power, never tried to reshape the organization, never created tension in the interview. But in the NFL, denial doesn't erase narrative. Once a label attaches, it doesn't need proof, it just needs repetition. And here's the part that matters most. No team ever publicly corrected the record. No follow-up interviews materialized. No second chance emerged to counter the perception. The league didn't investigate whether the stories were true. It simply moved on. From that moment forward, Leftwich stopped being discussed as an ascending head coach and started being treated as a risk. And in NFL hiring, perceived risk is enough to shut doors permanently. Because when teams stop asking questions, they stop offering opportunities. And after that interview cycle, the silence wasn't temporary, it became a pattern. The NFL loves to talk about merit, about results, about earning your next opportunity. But the coaching cycle tells a different story, one where momentum matters more than resumes and familiarity outweighs accomplishment. Around the same time Byron Leftwich fell off the radar, other coaches surged forward with far less on their record. One strong season, one perceived spark, and suddenly, doors flew open. Coordinators with thinner bodies of work were granted head coaching interviews, promotions, and second chances without hesitation. Take Dave Canales. After nearly 2 decades without ever calling plays at the NFL level, one season in Tampa Bay was enough to reshape his entire career. The offensive improvement was modest. The rushing attack remained one of the league's worst. And yet, that year was framed as proof of leadership and innovation, enough to land him a head coaching job. Liam Coen followed a similar path. One standout season, immediate interest. Interviews lined up. His success was treated as transferable, his growth assumed. Leftwich's story moved in the opposite direction. 4 years of sustained production, a Super Bowl ring, proven quarterback development. And instead of being elevated, he was evaluated down to a single season. 1 year that became the totality of his resume. This is the difference between failing forward and being filtered out. Some coaches are allowed to learn publicly. Others are judged permanently. Some are assumed to improve, others are assumed to be exposed. The NFL doesn't announce these distinctions, it never has to. They're enforced quietly through opportunity and omission. And once a coach is pushed outside the familiar hiring loop, it's almost impossible to get back in. For Byron Leftwich, the message was unmistakable. You don't get to reset, you don't get to rebrand, you don't get another shot. And when opportunity stops circulating, even the strongest resume can be made to disappear. What happened next is the clearest evidence that Byron Leftwich's situation was never normal. In the NFL, coaches almost never vanish, they recycle. Fired coordinators resurface as assistants. Former head coaches land consulting roles. Even failed experiments are given time to recalibrate. The league is built on second, third, and fourth chances. Leftwich received none of that. After being fired in January 2023, there was no rebound job waiting, no assistant role to reset his image, no coordinator vacancy that circled back to him. His name wasn't floated, his phone didn't ring. In a system that prides itself on relationships, silence became the loudest message possible. This wasn't about availability. Leftwich wanted to coach, he said so publicly. He hadn't changed his number, he wasn't stepping away. He simply wasn't being called. And that absence stands out precisely because of how unusual it is. Coaches with far less success are routinely rehired. Coaches attached to losing seasons are allowed to explain context. Leftwich wasn't given the chance. Instead, he was quietly removed from the conversation. No announcements, no explanations, just omission. While other coaches failed upward, Leftwich watched from the outside. He spent time with his son, drove him to school, cooked breakfast, lived a life the league assumes means you've moved on, even when you haven't. But this kind of silence isn't accidental. It's a decision. It's how the league enforces boundaries without public confrontation. You don't need to blacklist someone when you can simply stop calling them. And by the time a coach realizes what's happening, it's already complete. Because silence in the NFL isn't neutral, it's a verdict. And Byron Leftwich had just received this. Byron Leftwich's disappearance doesn't exist in isolation. It fits too cleanly into a pattern the NFL refuses to acknowledge. One where black coaches are judged by a different scale and punished more severely when they fall even slightly short of perfection. Brian Flores won games in Miami. Not hypothetically, actually won. He took over a broken roster, stabilized it, and finished with back-to-back winning seasons. Then he raised concerns about how the league operates. And overnight, he went from respected head coach to professional exile, something I'll get into in another video. His interviews slowed, opportunities narrowed, the resume stopped mattering. Eric Bieniemy coordinated one of the greatest offensive runs in NFL history. Super Bowl rings, MVP quarterbacks, record-breaking production. And for years, the league insisted he needed to prove more, as if excellence only counted when performed quietly and without expectation. Todd followed a similar path. Super Bowl winning coordinator, passed over repeatedly, finally hired only after others failed. Even then, his margin for error was thinner, his patience shorter, his success treated as temporary. And then there's Anthony Weaver, respected, interviewed, consistently praised in hiring cycles, always on the short list, never the final choice. Forever described as up next, a phrase that sounds encouraging until you realize it never leads anywhere. Different teams, different years, same outcome. These coaches aren't evaluated only on results. They're evaluated on comfort, on tone, on whether their success can be attributed elsewhere. When things go right, credit is shared or redirected. When things go wrong, accountability lands squarely on them and stays there. That's why Byron Leftwich's Super Bowl ring didn't protect him. That's why one down year erased four strong ones. That's why silence followed instead of opportunity. The league doesn't need to say it out loud. The patterns speak clearly enough, and I'm here to expose them. Because in the NFL, some coaches are allowed to grow, some are allowed to fail, and some are allowed to disappear. Byron Leftwich just happened to join the list the league pretends doesn't exist. Byron Leftwich hasn't stopped being a coach. His resume didn't expire. His football mind didn't disappear. What changed was the league's willingness to look at it. In a system built on second chances, silence became punishment. Not because he failed, but because his success was never fully owned in the first place. And that's the part the NFL doesn't want examined. Not just one coach, but a pattern. One where excellence isn't always enough, and where certain resumes are questioned longer, remembered shorter, and forgiven far less. If stories like this matter to you, if you believe football history deserves honesty, not revision, make sure you like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. This is Old School Sundays, where we tell the stories the league would rather you forget. Let's remind them why they matter. Thanks for watching.